The original Sonic the Hedgehog is such a significant title in the history of the 16-bit console war. With Nintendo's newest system launching in Western territories in 1991, Sega needed to ensure that they had something powerful to combat the Red Brand and their mascot Plumber. Sonic 1 was absolutely pivotal in ensuring that Sega kept the momentum of the Mega Drive going. The fact that it's 30 years later and Sonic has been killing it in Hollywood just highlights what a cultural phenomenon the Blue Needle Mouse still is. Sonic immediately became a system seller, and between comics, cartoons, and merchandise, Sonic was everywhere, and still is everywhere to an extent. The original game kicked off Sega to a supersonic trajectory of success. My first experience was actually 8-bit Sonic for the Master System, and that was an entirely different game. When I saw this title running on a relative's console, I was absolutely amazed by the speed that Sonic got up to in the tubes of Green Hill Zone. I'd never even heard the term blast processing at the time. Maybe that was an American marketing thing. Despite this running at 50Hz with all the slowdown that comes with that, I was still impressed by the velocity that Sonic could reach. Playing it back to back for this video, I had a great time. This game is very digestible. The varying routes and the level layouts give players plenty of options, and some routes are more kinetic than others. As a result of the popularity of Sonic and the longevity of the franchise, Sonic 1 has been ported to so many platforms. I've been collating data based on some playtests and research, i.e. Google searching, and I've been able to narrow down Sonic 1's builds. In short, there's 3 official Mega Drive ROMs, one of which didn't actually get released on the Mega Drive itself. There are a whole bunch of re-releases that use an emulation layer based on one of these 3 ROMs, and some of which present new features, but some of which are left fairly unedited. In addition, there are some bespoke ports of Sonic 1 out there that are built from the ground up for their respective hardware. Delisted versions of Sonic 1 will not be covered in this video, as I cannot recommend those. So with that many choices, that begs the question, which version should you go for? So let's talk about those Mega Drive ROMs. First we have Revision 0. This revision was featured on all Western Mega Drive cartridges and Genesis cartridges. This includes re-releases such as Sonic Compilation and Mega Games Volume 6. In addition, some official emulation re-releases still use this revision. The differences between this and later revisions will get covered more when we get to Revision 1, but they're mostly visual differences. So, is this game worth playing on original hardware still? There is something intangibly satisfying about seeing a retro game run on its original hardware. The only thing with original hardware is sometimes you have to jump through some hoops to get some good visual clarity on a modern television set. On top of that, if like me you're in a 50Hz region, then to get full speed you need to get a modded console or an import console. In addition, the original console and game are no longer in print, so then you have to go to the used market, and that's a whole discussion in of itself. This factor too applies to some of the re-releases that we will be covering. While I can see the merit in playing a game on original hardware, I can see how some of the more modern and simpler options would be preferable to a lot of the audience. One of the Sonic 1 re-releases that features Revision 0 is the PSP and PS2 version of the Sega Mega Drive Collection compilation. For its time, the performance and general emulation was better than some of the other options out there, but for 2022, I don't think I could really recommend this one. The PS2 version is however notable for having 60Hz playback, and it actually runs in 480p progressive scan, which was really uncommon in PAL territories. On top of that, spoiler alert, the PSP version is notable for being one of the first good portable official releases of Sonic 1. The compilation as well had a pretty decent lineup. This ROM revision also features in the unlockable version of Sonic 1 that features in Sonic Generations for the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360. Not the PC version though. This version runs fine, like the PSP and PS2 version is pretty bare bones, but this version is definitely quite competent. I can absolutely recommend Sonic Generations, but not just for the unlockable copy of Sonic 1, but that's a whole different conversation though. Okay, now let's look at Revision 1. This is the version that Japan originally received for their Mega Drive. They received Sonic 1 a month later than the US, and they had a few changes and upgrades added. In this revision, the level select screen has the levels in the correct chronological order. In addition, some visual effects saw improvements. The player is also awarded an extra life for every 50,000 points earned. Despite what some may have you believe, this revision did not change the behaviour of the game spikes. Should Sonic fall into a spike pit, his fate is sealed as he will not receive any invincibility frames even on this revision, regardless of whether he has a bubble shield or any rings. The Sega Mega Drive Ultimate Collection on the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 features this revision, and it performs quite well, and it's actually part of a compilation featuring a decent lineup. The only real nitpick I have with this release in regards to how it runs Sonic 1 is that you can't remove the border around it. But other than that, I can definitely recommend this release. The Sonic Classic Collection for the Nintendo DS is limited by its platform. It runs on a modified version of an emulator called Genesis DS with a J, originally developed as a fan project, but then licensed by Sega. Where have we heard that before? Due to the DS having a lower resolution screen than the Mega Drive's output, there's some cropping and some panning and scanning implemented, which is a bit weird to experience. It is DSi enhanced, which does help the frame rate somewhat, as opposed to the original where it can be quite slow, but the scanning and cropping is still jarring. Even at the time of its release, the PSP version was 4 years old and ran Sonic 1 better, albeit, as mentioned, not perfect. Featuring Revision 1, we also have the Sega Mega Drive Classics compilation for the Switch, PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. This was also on the Steam version before Sega delisted it for Sonic Origins release, so I cannot recommend the PC version on virtue of Sonic 1, but it's still fully intact on consoles. The emulation is quite serviceable, the compilation lineup is decent, and it's pretty fully featured. It's the only official release to have a rewind function, which is a nice feature for beginner players and admittedly for game capture. The PS4 version has PlayStation VR support, which is an odd little novelty. In this virtual reality space, you get placed into the bedroom from the main menu in front of a simulated CRT TV screen. I can absolutely recommend this release in general. It's a good compilation, it's easily available on current platforms, both physically and digitally, and it often goes on sale for quite a good affordable price. The following revision I'll refer to as Revision 2, as I've seen it referred to online, but it's effectively an official ROM hack more than anything else, and it never actually got released as a Mega Drive cartridge. Revision 2 first surfaced on the Sonic Mega Collection for the Nintendo GameCube, and then subsequently for Mega Collection Plus on PlayStation 2, Xbox and PC. The only real difference between this and Revision 1 is that the spike behaviour has been changed to ultimately behave the same way as in Sonic 2 onwards. Now if you fall into a spike pit while holding a ring or a shield, then you get a second chance with some iframes. This version also carries over the visual improvements made in Revision 1 over Revision 0. So how is Sonic Mega Collection as a package? Well, I really liked the GameCube version. I got it back when it first came out, and it was really fun experiencing all these games again on my GameCube. This was the first time I got to experience Sonic 1 in full speed at 60Hz. The emulation was decent, it looks nice and scales well, and there was just a whole bunch of extra content that was really nice for any Sonic fan to look at. What about Mega Collection Plus? Well, for some reason, we only got 50Hz for the PAL release. Even on PC for some reason, it's like they artificially added slowdown. I don't get it, maybe they thought that we're just used to the slowdown, that's what we'd want? I didn't want that. The emulation was worse, and the presentation just lacked something, and some of the extra content was removed from it, albeit with some new content placed in its stead. There were some extra features like save states added, and some extra Game Gear games added that never featured in the original version, so it's not bad, but again, with the poorer emulation, I recommend the GameCube version over this. The next couple of releases kind of rely on emulation, but they've definitely ported in some extra features, both of which were developed by M2. The first of which is the 3DS release, which is part of the Sega 3D Classics line of games. It was released physically as part of the Sega 3D Classics collection and digitally on the 3DS eShop. This release features two builds, one of which is based on Revision 0, labelled as International, and another one based on Revision 2, labelled as Japan. As implied by the game's title, this has support for the 3D function of the 3DS, and it's some of the best stereoscopic 3D I've experienced on the system. While this is not the first release to feature Sonic Spin Dash from Sonic 2, it's a nice welcome addition. The emulation in this release is impeccable, and I can absolutely recommend this in 2022. However, it's worth noting that the 3DS eShop is due to close next year, at which point your only official option for this version will be the physical release. Following this release, M2 ported Sonic 1 to the Nintendo Switch under the Sega Ages lineup of games. This carries over Revision 0 and Revision 2 from the 3DS release. This release also features the Mega Play version of Sonic 1, previously only playable on the Mega Play system, a jammer-based arcade cabinet designed to play proprietary versions of Mega Drive games. The Mega Play version of Sonic 1 only features 4 of the game zones plus the final zone, and each level is subject to a time limit. The player has 3 lives per credit to finish the game, and they cannot earn extra lives in the game. Additional features included in the Ages release are a ring keep mode that starts each level with 10 rings, with damage taken by enemies and level obstacles only taking half of your rings, as well as a ring chain counter, and the addition of the drop dash ability from Sonic Mania, and the re-implementation of Sonic 2's spin dash ability. The emulation in this release is impeccable, and the amount of features available to the player is impressive. I can absolutely recommend this version and say it's easily worth the £6 price on the Switch eShop. Okay, now let's get to some bespoke ports. First we have the Sega Saturn release, Sonic Jam. This is an interesting oddity actually. The positives, well, it's the first official release to give Sonic 1 the spin dash. It runs quite smoothly, looks nice, and has exclusive easy and normal difficulty modes with altered enemy and item placements not seen in any future official release. This is part of a compilation that many Sonic fans would love to have. A benefit of it being a port is that it was optimised for 50Hz. Some of the negatives are that the sound effects are sampled at a lower quality or outright changed, and the music doesn't loop when a life or the speed sneakers are picked up, and this is due to the CD format's load times. It's got a lot going for it and some features not seen on any other official release, but sadly due to it being somewhat of a collector's item on the underappreciated Saturn, it's got a high price of entry due to being stuck on the aging hardware with dying disk drives. It's definitely one for the enthusiast Sonic fan. Next we have Sonic the Hedgehog Genesis for the Game Boy Advance. You don't want this version. It runs poorly, sounds terrible, and it has some of the worst screen crunch I've experienced on a handheld. This was meant to be a 15th anniversary celebration product. Not even the addition of a level select mode called Anniversary Mode, nor the inclusion of a butchered spin dash could save this release. I dare say Sonic the Hedgehog Genesis is the worst way to play this game, and one of the worst Sonic games ever made. Now let's get to something more positive. Back in 2011, Christian Whitehead developed a fan port of Sonic CD for mobile devices, which Sega ends up licensing and distributing. Following this and its subsequent ports to PS3 and 360, he brought Sonic 1 and Sonic 2 to this retro engine that he made from the ground up, originally for Sonic CD, and these releases came out on iOS and Android. These ports are reputable for being very good versions of the classic games to play. I played through the Android version for this video on a Google Pixel 4a 5G using a DualShock 4 over Bluetooth, and with the help of a clip I got off of eBay, it was actually a pretty nifty way of playing it. So what features does it have? Well, there's an optional spin dash carried over from some previous releases, but unlike previous releases, this has widescreen that caters to multiple different aspect ratios due to the varied nature of phone screens, as opposed to simply 16:9 only. It's a port built from the ground up, like I said, on Retro Engine, and several boss battles have different layouts to cater for the additional screen space. You can unlock Tails or Knuckles as playable characters, and you can even have Sonic and Tails, with Tails acting as a CPU partner. There are several game modifiers available via the combination of the classic hidden level select sheet, such as the old Sonic 1 spike behaviour and the bubble shields from Sonic 3. I don't know why these features aren't in the main menu's options screen. I didn't even realise that these options were available until I'd nearly finished this video. The changed bubble shields are game changers. Having the fire shield in Marble Zone streamlines so many sections by letting you run over lava, and the water bubble shield in Labyrinth gives Sonic unlimited oxygen to breathe, which really helps with that level. This release also adds a 7th special stage, which by the way is incredibly difficult, but you get a 7th emerald and resultantly supersonic, like in Sonic 2 onwards. There are some differences here and there from the original release, such as some temporary iframes for Robotnik when he's descending into the fight scene of a boss fight, especially with Green Hill Zone, which is slightly annoying, but what can you do? And a smoother scrolling speed for the special stages, which can really mess with your muscle memory and make it a bit harder to land certain jumps. This release supports HID compatible Bluetooth controllers, so if you don't feel like using the touchscreen, you have other options. For £1.79, I can absolutely recommend this release. It's a very nice version of Sonic 1 and fully featured. I dare say it's my favourite portable release of Sonic 1, and that's with some very stiff competition from M2's Switch and 3DS releases. Finally, we have Sonic Origins, which I played on the Xbox Series X for this video. Now, this release has taken a verbal battering on YouTube in recent weeks, and I'm not about to say they're wrong because there are a lot of issues. On the other hand, I won't say that this game doesn't do anything right, because this release does do some neat things. The elephant in the room is the controversy around the game's release. The developers were subject to crunch conditions, and there were bugs that were not previously found in Headcanon's work that were added from the integration process by Sega's own internal team. Headcanon made Sega's executives aware of the technical issues, but Sega would not afford them more time to work on it. Additionally, ahead of this release, many digital versions of Sonic 1 were delisted from their digital marketplaces. This release comes at a quite high price point, and the use of Day 1 DLC adds further cost to this. I consider all of these actions quite anti-consumer on the part of the people that made these decisions.
That's no good.
So how does Sonic 1 on Sonic Origins play, and what does it actually offer the player? In this release we see Tails and Knuckles return as playable characters, who both seem to play fine, and via the level select cheat brought over from the mobile port, followed by selecting player 00, we get Sonic and Tails, and that one isn't fine. If you're familiar with some of the ongoing bugs and problems with Sonic Origins, then you may be familiar with what's been dubbed as the Tails bug. If your CPU partner Tails goes off screen, then the chances are he's not going to catch up with you, but instead get stuck on another part of the level, and just keep jumping over and over again, so you get the chorus of the repetitive jumping noises throughout the rest of your level. This can go on throughout the majority of your playthrough. One thing I find particularly interesting is that on the character select screen, you get to choose between Sonic, Tails and Knuckles, but not Sonic and Tails together, whereas on the mobile release you did get that choice. Most of the discussion of this bug seems to be based around Sonic 2, but it definitely is present in this game as well. I hope it gets patched, and that feels weird to say about a 1991 Mega Drive game. I mean, that's pretty stupid. This release retains all of the features from the mobile version that it's based on. The Anniversary mode has the widescreen presentation and boss layouts from the mobile release, but with the removal of lives in exchange for coins. These coins can be used for retries on special stages, and for purchasing in-game content in the museum. The player still has incentive to get 100 rings. This game also features a classic mode, which has the original life system, a 4x3 presentation, and the original boss fight layouts, although Robotnik keeps his iframes when descending into battle, as this version is still based on the retro engine. This is not a ROM running in an emulator. The Anniversary mode features Sonic's drop dash from Sonic Mania, while this Classic mode removes that feature. Both Classic and Anniversary feature the spin dash function, unless you use the level select cheat to remove it. There's also a mirror mode based on the Anniversary build that flips it horizontally so that you end up running left more often than right, which is an interesting new way to play if you want to ditch your muscle memory. There is also a featured mission mode in which the set character must meet the set criteria and reach the goal in an allotted time to earn a rank. Sonic Origins also features some new cutscenes at the start and end of each game, and they're very much in the style of the Sonic Mania Adventures short cartoons. They're actually quite adorable. Honestly, I enjoyed this release for the most part. I mean, there's some less than stellar visual filtering, there's that really unacceptable CPU Tails bug, it's unfinished, it needs some fixing, but I still enjoyed it. We should absolutely hold the executives at Sega accountable for the decisions, there's no excuse. As a whole though, it's an enjoyable way to play Sonic 1, I mean we've definitely had worse. While this release has more features than the mobile release it's derived from, it comes with more bugs too, and with the mobile release being a mere £1.79, Sonic Origins is a pretty tough sell at its current price point and its current state. So while I was admittedly slowly editing this video together, patch 1.0.4 came out and fixed the Tails bug, so that's an improvement, but again, we're looking at patches for what's effectively remakes of Mega Drive games, so not great. And yes, I know it's a new engine, a retro engine, but the mobile port didn't have that issue, so yeah. But hey, you know, victories where you can take them. I don't think there is any one version of Sonic 1 I can call definitive. I think that's relative to the player. Some players who grew up with the original cartridge may feel that it's the only way it should be played, even with the 50Hz slowdown in power territories, as that was the hardware it was made for. Some may have first experienced this classic through the Sonic Mega Collection, or one of the many other compilations Sonic 1 features in. We've got the oddity of Sonic Jam that has features we've not seen in any official release that came afterwards. There's the easy availability of the current Sega Mega Drive Classics compilation, with its library of roughly 40 games and a relatively cheap asking price that cannot be ignored either. We've also got the highly polished releases by M2 for the Switch and the 3DS. There's a lot of good releases of Sonic 1, but not all of them are good. Sonic's release history is more up and down than that of the Hills of Green. When Sonic 1 is presented well though, you have a real classic game that is historical for a reason. It might not be everyone's favourite of the classic games, but it's definitely still worth your time. Hang on a minute, I better talk about some fan projects. I mean, this is Sonic, and fan creations are a big part of the greatness of this fandom. I need to go over some of this stuff. Now, this isn't a complete comprehensive list, as this video would just outright not get finished if I tried that. There's too many out there. Here's a few projects that I really just want to highlight and gush over. First, I'd like to talk about the Decompilation project for Sonic the Hedgehog 2013's Retro Engine release. The code was broken down and reverse engineered so that community modders and programmers could port this version of Sonic the Hedgehog to various platforms. It first appeared on PC, as is the norm for these projects, but there are ports to other platforms like the PlayStation Vita, the Switch, and even the 3DS. Some ports are still works in progress and could be buggy on some platforms, kind of like Origins, but the PC version is definitely fully playable. There are several steps required to get this port running. It's not just a matter of click and play, but I've left a useful guide in the video description if you'd like to try it for yourself. You need your own legitimate copy of Sonic 1 2013 to get the data files from. I extracted the files necessary from the Android version. Once you get it running, you'll need to tweak the settings via a .ini file if you want full screen playback and to change some of the other settings. Remember, this is a homebrew project, so you won't always get a simple graphical user interface to change this stuff. The release also supports mods, and these mods can be put onto platforms outside of the PC release as well. There's even a tool to mod the Android version now. One community project that takes this decompilation even further is a release called Sonic 1 Forever. Do you want a GUI for the decompilation? Well, there you go. What a release! Sonic 1 Forever even has some extra features not seen in the mobile release. Now we've got drop dash, more visual options, more sound options, some new assets, and mod support's been carried over as well from the decompilation. The boss collision detection has been fixed, and there's a different and easier 7th special stage than seen in the other Retro Engine ports, such as Sonic Origins. Now we have a boss rush, a special stage gauntlet, and a special stage maker in this release. The user interface is so intuitive, it even has the Google Play achievements carried over from the mobile version. In addition to these releases, if you want to go old school, you've got Romhacks. Now, getting your own official ROM to apply patches to used to be as simple as just buying the game on Steam and grabbing the file from the installation directory, but since Sega delisted that, you're now going to have to find other ways. A lot of these hacks work through a flash cart on original hardware. Alternatively, you can just fire up an emulator. With these, you can play Sonic 1 as Tails or Knuckles on original hardware. You can even play as Team Chaotix. You know what's great? When your CPU partners go off screen, they respawn next to you. That's quite the novelty, ain't it? You can play easy mode from Sonic Jam on original hardware with this as well. Hell, you can even play as frickin' Kirby. On the Game Boy Advance, there's even a proof of concept ROM hack by Stealth that kind of fixes a lot of the issues in the Game Boy Advance version, albeit you can only play Green Hill Zone in this release. I think my favourite Sonic 1 ROM hack though is definitely the Mega Drive hack Sonic Classic Heroes. Being able to swap between the Sonic Heroes or Team Chaotix on the fly in both Sonic 1 and 2 is great fun. It has a bunch of quality of life features that are so damn useful. Thank you for joining me if you made it this far. Now go play Sonic 1, however you prefer, and have fun. Take care everyone.